So, welcome to today's video. I'm sure some of you will know that I have gotten on a bit of a Victorinox kick as of lately, and for a while now my main everyday carry knife has been this guy, the Victorinox Cyber Tool, the large edition. And if you've watched my latest EDC update video, you will know that I absolutely do love this little pocket tool. But my main gripe with it is the fact that these smooth Celador scales are really rather slippery, and yeah, ergonomically speaking, I'm just not a huge fan. In terms of the looks, in terms of the aesthetics, they are really not that bad. I prefer them over the regular red Celador scales, but again, just in terms of how slippery they are, in terms of how well you're able to grip the knife, not a huge fan really. So many of you suggested what is actually rather obvious, and that is to go for a different set of replacement scales. And there are many custom scales out there, but I think among the most famous ones are the custom scales by a German company called Daily Customs. And that company has been on my radar for a while now, but sadly, first of all, a lot of the scales that I would actually be interested in seem to be out of stock all of the time, which is just too bad. And also, I was really not looking forward to your regular titanium scales or brass scales or whatever, but I was really rather looking for some proper Micarta scales, which I couldn't find on their website, but I could find another dealer that had Daily Customs Micarta scales, and so I ordered a pair. And when they arrived, I thought that they looked really nice, but I wasn't quite sure if they would fit the look of the Cyber Tool. And so I actually decided against putting them on my Cyber Tool, so that remains as it is, at least for now. And instead, I decided to put them on my Victorinox Compact, which is among the top 3 of my favorite 91mm Victorinox models. So yeah, let's talk about the installment process, and then I tell you a bit about how I like these scales and what I think about them so far. Okay, so overall I would rate the install process as pretty easy. First of all though, the scales came in this neat little cardboard box. Nice presentation, good stuff. And I mean, just look at these scales. Man, I really just love that green micarta. It's so cool. Anyway, first of all, you do of course need to get the old scales off. To do that, I started by removing all of the tools. So in this case, that includes the pocket clip, the screwdriver, the tweezers, the toothpick or ferro rod in my case, as well as the pen. I then used this one tool on my Cyber Tool that I don't think I've ever used before, but it worked perfectly to get into the slots for the scale tools, and then it's just a matter of gently prying the scales off step by step. Once the scales were off, I did a quick test to try how well the new ones fit, and I was surprised that they held on pretty damn well even without any gluing process. But there was certainly still a bit of a gap, because these scale tools would just fall straight out. There was like zero retention, which got me a little worried, but more on that later. So anyway, I gave the bare knife a good rub down with some lighter fluid. You can also use cleaning alcohol or whatever. Let it dry off and begin to mix the 2-part epoxy. I would really recommend to not do it like you see me doing here, but instead to wear some rubber gloves. Really not proud of myself here. Anyway, once the epoxy is mixed, it's just a matter of evenly applying it to the inside of the scales. Obviously, don't get any epoxy in the slots for the scale tools. That should be pretty self-explanatory though. And then it's just a matter of putting it all together and applying even pressure for the next few hours. And since I didn't want to sit there for the rest of the night, I used these clamps to clamp it all together and then called it a night. I honestly don't know how long this epoxy needs to dry. It says 12 hours on the thing, but I simply did the install in the evening before I went to bed, and then took the clamps off about 24 hours later on the evening of the following day after I got home from work. And gotta say, pretty nice. It certainly looks different, kind of the point I guess, but what I'm trying to say is that it looks cool, but I had to get used to it for like half a day. But on a slightly different note, when I put all of the scale tools back in, I found out that the ferro rod toothpick replacement simply wouldn't work with these scales. Bit of a shame, but not a deal breaker in my opinion. At least not for a knife like the Compact. The actual toothpick works just fine, but this ferro rod just has zero retention and falls right out. Other than that, very happy with how it turned out. Okay, so far I've only been using these Micarta scales for a few days now, so I can't really give you like a full conclusion, but I can tell you a few things so far. And on the positive side, I can tell you that these scales look really, really nice in my opinion. Straight out of the box, the green looked a bit too washed out. These are a raw machine finish, so they are not polished or anything, but that's just pretty much how it is with Micarta, obviously. And as soon as these scales start to soak up a bit of the oils in your hands and all the sweat in your pockets and all of that, they start to get like a really nice patina. Again, I'm just a few days in, but I can already see a massive difference, and that's really nice. And what I can also say is that these scales are really, really well made and just very precisely machined. So if you want a good quality pair of Micarta scales, I would absolutely recommend them. But there are a few things that you should probably be aware of. Well, first of all, I think it's very, very nice that you can even get these Micarta scales with the cutouts for the scale tools, because that's actually one of my main issues with something like even the Victorinox original hardwood scales, because those don't offer any sort of cutout for your scale tools. So you basically just lose your scale tools, which is a bit of a shame because I really like the scale tools on a Victorinox. But even with these are the plus scales, so you do get the tweezers, the toothpick and the pen. But even with these, you do lose the little hole that sits underneath the corkscrew on a regular Celador scale, and that houses a little pin. And that pin, you know, I'm not using it all of the time, not gonna lie, but I use it occasionally. And obviously, as these things usually go, I would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I can certainly do without that pin, but again, I would really prefer to have it. And yeah, that's something that I wish that daily customs would add for their plus scales. And another slight negative, which isn't too bad for something like a Victorinox compact, but I would really not be too happy about if I had bought these scales to put on something like a Victorinox Huntsman, is that with these scales you're not able to house something like ferro rod replacement for the toothpick. So the regular toothpick fits just fine. So I think if you can even call that a fault, it's certainly not something that you can blame daily customs for, because again, the toothpick, so the tool that it should be able to house, does fit and it works. But if you want to use something like a ferro rod and you want to keep it in the toothpick slot, as I usually do, at least with other tools like my Cyber Tool Large or my Huntsman, that will simply just drop out. There's just no retention, so it doesn't really work. You can obviously still use something like a Firefly ferro rod, the ones that you can actually buy from Victorinox, but if you were to use that, you would obviously lose the capability to carry something like a little corkscrew screwdriver, or in my case the sim tool. And I really do like the sim tool because I use that to adjust the bracelet of my watch all of the time. It's actually one of my main used tools on this guy, so no ferro rod on my Victorinox compact, but since this is not really meant as an outdoor tool, I can certainly do without that. Oh yeah, one other drawback that I do want to mention is just the fact that with these OD green scales in Micarta, it does lose a bit of that Victorinox friendly and well-known charm. So usually when you take out a Victorinox, nobody is really threatened by it. Everybody knows what a Victorinox is like, and everybody knows that they are just tools. And the same is still true with this to a degree, but to a lesser degree certainly. I think that with the red Celador scales or with the hardwood scales from Victorinox, the knife overall looks just a lot less threatening, and it's just the aesthetic that Victorinox knives are kind of known for. And this is a bit different, and especially with the military green, well, I don't care. I still think it looks like a Swiss Army knife, so I think it's fine. But I just wanted to put that out there. Overall though, I would say that I'm very happy with my purchase. And I would also say that it's really, really not hard to put these guys on. You just need a few things. I was honestly a bit surprised by just how easy the whole process was. So I think it's kind of nice to have custom Victorinox, because aside from it just looking nicer, it also just offers more grip, and it kind of just makes it your own in a way, which is Much appreciated. Anyway, that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care. Bye.